was a summer day in 1968 that Jeff Fort was called to testify in Washington, D.C. before an investigating subcommittee of the United States Senate. But why was the Chicago gang leader the focus of national attention and debate? To answer that question, one has to go back to Woodlawn. Bishop Arthur Brazier.
We were desperate. We were trying to do something about a situation that was literally destroying this community.
The shooting, the killing, the turf wars in Woodlawn just would not stop. Those wars, in turn, spawned another kind of combat, a fight over how to stop the gangs. The battle lines were drawn, community leaders against politicians, cops against clergy, liberals against conservatives. And the lightning rod of this conflict was a man by the name of John Frye.
John Frye was a very prophetic man, a really, truly prophetic man.
We felt that Reverend Frye was very similar to Hitler.
It was John Frye who gave Jeff Fort's gang a home. John Frye was the minister at the First Presbyterian Church of Woodlawn, and he let the Blackstone Rangers use his church as their base of operation.
Reverend Frye gave us the use of the church, not willingly. We tied Reverend Frye up for 4 days. He didn't really want to bow down and give the church to us.
You physically tied him up for 4 days?
Physically tied him up and fed him.
For 4 days?
For 4 days.
Why?
He didn't want drugs and guns in his church.
And so John Frye, you're telling me, was afraid of you and let you have what you wanted?
The man was afraid.
Charles LaPaglia, Frye's associate, says that is a lie and that many lies were told about him and Frye and what was going on at the First Presbyterian Church. John Frye, meanwhile, would argue the gangs were not the problem in Woodlawn, society was.
I think that it is really society that is killing black people.
I think John believed that the Stones had some function beyond being a gang.
I don't think that they would have reached the significance they did had it not been for the First Presbyterian Church and the Reverend John Frye.
He believed that they could be a constructive force in their own community.
But could John Frye's vision of greater opportunity alter the course of the Blackstone Rangers and Jeff Fort? Father Tracy O'Sullivan.
I think John Frye was very creative and committed and a passionate sense of justice. At the same time, I think John Frye was not open to compromise, did not see the complexity of the situation, was not able to see that Jeff Fort and the others were not all good guys, that they weren't straight out angelic. I constantly asked the questions, well, fine, but what about the killings? That was the constant question we had. We never got to a point where the violence stopped.
And my office was bombarded constantly by families, by clergymen, asking us what was TWO going to do about the gang problem. Every effort to break up these gangs or youth groups, they all failed.
So you were seeking some way to learn to live with them and for them to learn to live with you?
And so they could make a positive contribution to the community.
At the same time that John Frye was reaching out to the Blackstone Rangers, Arthur Brazier of the Apostolic Church of God had just become the head of the fledgling Woodlawn organization. Brazier's contribution was to get, despite the objections of Mayor Richard J. Daley, a federal grant worth $1 million. The idea was to use the money to teach both the Blackstone Rangers and the Eastside Disciples job skills, and to use the leadership of those gangs to help run the program, to try to channel that leadership into constructive avenues.
Where they can be a benefit to the community rather than a detriment.
It was a bona fide effort to try to take these gangs that were shooting one another down in the street. The police were unable to deal with it, and to try to take them as they were and try to refocus their ideas on something much more constructive. It was an experimental program.
An experiment worth pursuing because the gang war was intense, because business was being extorted to pay protection to the gangs, because Woodlawn was overcrowded, in racial transition, and in turmoil. Something had to be done, but police were appalled at this particular